And the batter's up. Eyes the pitcher. There's the windup. Hit! It's a hit! Out to left field.
I remember hearing the story that my mother called the doctor sometime during the week after he'd been diagnosed with the flu. He told her that she was hysterical, so apparently she thought she was trying to tell him, I don't think this is the flu, and that he would be fine. My dad went to put him out of the high chair. They said his legs were kind of like chains. They just were rubbery. They wouldn't hold him. It was diagnosed over the telephone that the doctor said he has polio, get him here immediately. He went first to the Chambersburg Hospital, and they did the spinal tap, and the same night sent him on to Harrisburg. He went from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh by train and spent 14 months in Pittsburgh. Industrial Home for Crippled Children is what it was called.
Often we would take him with us when we went places. While I was dating his sister Marion, we did not have wheelchairs that could get up and down the different steps and into and out of the buildings. And of course that has been Lynn's forte at this time, accessibility for the handicapped, and he saw that in those early years. Every place that he needed to be, there seemed to be an obstacle. In communications with Marion, I always had to, of course, communicate with Lynn. He was sort of the social chairman of the household. If anything was going on, Lynn knew what it was. And he always wanted to know where we're going and what we were doing. And if he wanted to go, he'd let us know.
I went through a leg surgery and I had a lot of physical problems. What was supposed to take a month took 5 months. I lost a lot of confidence. Very insecure kid. I was must have been around 10. But I love the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, I was in Pittsburgh and I had an old crystal radio set. My bed was next to a radio. You take an alligator clip it to the radiator and stick the earpiece in and hide the receiver underneath the pillow. So the nurse didn't know you were listening to it, and kind of a clandestine way, because you had to be asleep at 8 if the Pirates were on. And all these little kids had been going to sleep, so I listened to the Pirates, and of course the next day they were amazed that I knew what had happened the night before. Because I wasn't smart enough not to keep my mouth shut. So I was talking about the game, they wondered how I knew that. But it came time to start walking with the crutches again, and I was absolutely terrified of falling. And I had a lot of the I can't do it attitude. And the physical therapist, Miss Whitfield, she kept encouraging, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And I would try to convince her there's no way in the world. And I would cry, and I got to the point where I was stuttering because my nerves were going. I was just a very insecure kid at that point. And one day she came in, she says, the Pirates are playing the Dodgers tonight. I said, oh, I know. I says, well, what, do you want to go? I said, well, oh, wow. I'd love to go. So she handed me a ticket. And she said, well, then go. And I said, well, are you going with me? She said, no, you're going by yourself. And I said, well, I can't do that. She said, well, it's the Pirates and the Dodgers. You want to try it? I said, well, how would I get there? And she said, well, I'll call a cab for you. So they called the cab, and picked me up like 3 hours before game time. I had to negotiate a curb, then I had to negotiate a ramp. And by the time I got to where I wanted, it was about 2 hours later, and I was just wringing wet from perspiration, stress, and everything else. And I turned the corner to see where my seat was, and there sat Mrs. Whitfield. And she said, I knew you could do it. and I laughed and I cried and I thanked her. My dad went to the 8th grade, went to a one-room school. His opportunities were limited. He wanted the best for his kids. He ran a garage. He was a mechanic, a very good mechanic. Kind of quiet, but when he talked, you listen, you respect it. Warfordburg, Pennsylvania is a community of 100 people. It hasn't changed in 150 years. And at that point in time, the post office was one room of our house. And Mother was the postmaster. And Dad ran the garage next door. This was prior to interstates, so you had a lot of traffic, so there was a lot of gas business. He would always include me in things. Sometimes it was make work, I guess, but he'd come down and I'd be running right there at the garage. So he'd say, how about, let me show you how to weld these two pieces of metal together. So all of a sudden I'd be working with these acetylene welder. He'd say, boy, can you get on this crawler? There's a bolt under here I can't get to. Take the ratchet and loosen this bolt. Well, he could get to the bolt, but he was including me in the process.
I worked in a garage for Brownie then during my last 2 years in high school, which had been 52 and 53 around that time. Brownie had an old 1942 Ford, and I would take Lynn over to his treatments during the week there, I think one night a week. And I appreciated that. He trusted me, being a 16-year-old and everything.
Lenny never left his disability stop him from playing baseball. He would bat, stand up there and bat, and then somebody would run the bases for him. But he was into everything that we did, playground-wise. Then after it was over, somebody would stand in his legs, and someone would get him around under the arms and carry him in and carry him out.
I remember this crippled boy coming to our Little League picnic. The next thing I know, Lynn had taken his braces off of his legs and his chest support, so to speak. So he was in the batter's box ready to swing a bat. And we were saying, well, he's going to be okay to swing, but how's he going to get there? Well, lo and behold, he hit the ball and he crawled his way to first base, and he was just one of the guys, I think, after that.
I mean, I could hit somebody, run for me. And it was never sit on the sidelines, you would participate. Earl Hendershot, Daryl Hendershot, they were about my age. Earl and I were only 5 days apart. Gary Hass, another boy that lived there in the area, and we were all the same age. We all had the same interest. Earl Hendershot's probably carried me 500 miles in his life as a kid. If it was recessed, Earl would grab me under the arms, Gary would grab my legs, and somebody else would grab the crutches. And within 30 seconds, we were on the playground. The ball game had begun. There was a baseball team in Buck Valley, Pennsylvania, a pickup team that older fellas that played every weekend. They played the other towns. Something out of the 1890s. They really was. And I'd go keep score. As we got up to around 10 or 11, the Little League came in, and Dr. Shives, whole veterinarian, would come around the area and pick up all the kids from the Warfordburg area to go to Hancock to play baseball. And he would pick me up too. I would keep score.
He went to high school in a school that was 2 stories with no elevator. And they had, the book Up the Down Staircase, or I guess there was a movie made of it too. It was a school like that where you always went up one set of, there was a set of stairs at each end of the hall. And if you had a class here, and that was the down staircase, and you were going upstairs, you walked all the way to the end of the hall and, up to where your class was. And nobody ever questioned it. I mean, it was like, that's the rule, that's the way it's done. And Len did it too. I mean, now I question why he couldn't have gone up the down staircase, but he didn't. It was like, we all do it this way. And those guys would always be there to help him up the stairs or down the stairs, because that was something he couldn't do.
This is Lynn as one of the two managers.
Look at my feet. You can tell the type of braces.
That's the beginning of the writing career. That is in high school. That's the newspaper staff. Lynn was the sports editor of the newspaper. Lynn is a historian in the senior class. These are the senior class officers
Right.
from Orpheusburg. Earl Hendershot helped carry Lynn on one end,
And Gary was at the other.
and Gary Hess at the other end.
We traveled lots of miles together. Tom was he was an incredible fielder. The reason for that, we would play ball on the back porch at my mother's house, and I was sitting on the floor on my butt, and I would throw to him, and of course more often than not the ball was land about a foot short. They had to catch it or get killed. I was a real student of baseball. I couldn't necessarily do the things, but I knew what needed to be done. I knew how to correct problems, flaws in his game, and I became kind of a brother and a mentor, but also a coach. Then when Daddy died, Tom, he was only, 10-ish maybe. At that time, I was coaching Little League Baseball. Through those years, it strengthened our relationship. I had the guidance counselor that telling me all the time I had to go to little school because there's no way I could get around. So I applied to the biggest school I could find to see if he was right or not. And it's terrible, but that's the way it was. And I was accepted at Maryland. At that point in time, I had never walked up a step in my life without the aid of a banister. And when I pulled up to my dormitory, Talbot Hall at the university, and I saw 14 steps going up with no banister, I was terrified. No one. There were some shrubs along the one wall. Buddy and I, we trimmed the shrubs back so I could get to the wall of the building and use the wall to hold to. And we made a way. Going to a big school was a challenge. It was probably the smartest thing I did and probably the dumbest thing I ever did. But here again, it taught me how to deal with obstacles. The first week was absolute total hell. They had a policy that you could park in one parking lot in a metropolitan campus like that, parking's at a premium. Well, my classes scattered all over this massive campus. And I went down and I tried to talk to the chief of police. He and I had a real battle right off the bat. He said, you knew you had a problem when you came here. Why'd you come here anyway? You knew you couldn't get around, and if I give you the one parking pass, I gotta do it for everybody. I'm not gonna do it just tough nookies. That was a message. And I didn't know what to do, so I'm out there. I'm trying to hoof it, okay? So on Friday of that first week, I'm at the Business Public Administration building waiting for a class to change. And the lights go out. I went out like a light. My blood pressure was evidently off the board, and I'd run out of gas. And so I go back and I got my 62 Falcon, headed back to Orpheusburg, and talked about maybe transferring to Shepherd College down there nearby, West Virginia, close by. And my Uncle Lim, mother's brother, now there was a tiger. He's gone now, but he was one of those, another one that, don't tell me you can't do it. There's got to be a way to do this, you know. And he got on the phone with a political buddy of his, just raising Cain, you know. Sure to God something can be worked out. And the senator called me back. He was a state senator and told me, go back to my dorm and don't leave the dorm until he got a phone call, and I didn't know what was going to happen. So I get a call from the administration building. I was asked to come down, and they wanted to know where my classes were. And I pointed at all the buildings. They told me to go back to my dormitory. Well, a few hours later, here comes the chief of police. Of course, he had his tail tucked between his legs. I didn't mean to get him in trouble. I was just trying to solve a problem. Now, this is before ADA. And there were no disabled people on this campus. You know, just wasn't to be. Couldn't happen. There's no cutaways. There was no accommodations at all. So he comes in, he says, Mr. Anderson, he says, there's no way in the world I can give you a pass, a parking sticker for all these parking lots. He said, because I would just be overrun by everybody. They said, this is what we're going to do. We've got a lot of policemen here. They don't know you. Every time you get a ticket, put it in your glove box. And you come down and see me tomorrow, and I'll introduce you to Sergeant O'Brien. And once a month, you bring all your tickets in. Sergeant O'Brien will take care of it. There were some changes made at the university that were more accommodating. My sister, probably my best friend, she was hell-bent that I was going to be an accountant. Because I just couldn't be running all over the place, trying to protect her kid brother, you know. In my sophomore year, I kept telling Marion, I don't want to do this. You got to do this. It's right for you. And I'm sitting there taking the final exam, and I got a B in this accounting course. And I'm just up to my eyeballs. I'm doing something I don't want to do. And they handed out the exam. I signed my name at the top of the book, stood up, handed it back to him, and left the room. And he came and said, are you not feeling well? I said, no. I said, I just made a decision. I don't want to be an accountant. He said, well, if you're not feeling well, you can take the exam tomorrow, because I know you didn't look at it. I said, I don't want to take it. He said, well, if you do that, I'm going to have to fail you, because it was 50% of the grade, the final. And I said, well, maybe that's a way of convincing my sister that I don't want to be an accountant. You do what you got to do, and I'm doing what I got to do. So that was my one F. But that was my line in the sand. Our next door neighbor in the dorm was on the baseball team. And in the winter months, they would have their team meetings, and they have guest speakers come in, and he said, look, they got Billy Hunter coming in. Billy Hunter was the third base coach for the Orioles at that time. And if you'd like to go over and hear him, I said, Lord, that'd be great. So I go over to this baseball meeting and sit in the back. And I just want to see Billy Hunter. And I listened to the thing, and after it's over, the baseball coach at Maryland, a guy named Jack Jackson, he said, our manager is graduating this year. And guys, keep an eye out for somebody who's interested in getting involved in the program here. So after the meeting, I went up, and of course, I was on the crutches, and I introduced myself. I sure would like to talk to you about that. And he kind of looked at me like I was at least talking about it. And I said, well, come over tomorrow and let's visit a little bit. And their first visit was, can you write a letter? Can you type? Can you do this? Can you do that? So as the process started, now I'm ordering his bats. I'm ordering his uniforms. I'm doing his correspondence. I'm doing his recruiting letters. After my freshman year, I go home, and Jackson calls me at the door and he says, "You're supposed to be in Dr. Palmer Hopkins' office tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Be there and be prompt." And I said, what's that? Who is that? He said, "He's down at the administration building. He just needs to see you." I said, "Do you know what it's about?" "Nope. Just know it's 10 o'clock, be there." So I get on, I'm terrified. And when I pull up and I find he's right beside the chancellor's room. And I know I've done something really bad, but I don't know what it was. So when I go in there, the secretary comes out and gets me, and we go in this big office, and he comes over and shakes my hand, congratulates me and all that, and I don't have a clue I'm there for. But I'm there to sign the grant and papers to pay for the rest of my schooling. And that was by Jack Jackson. It paid for everything the last 3 years. It was very unusual for anyone with a disability getting an opportunity even to participate with a sport.
This is the team from 1965 that won the Atlantic Coast Conference
That was the first time.
Championship.
First time. Big university. The non-revenue producing sports, like baseball, lacrosse, wrestling, swimming, and so forth. They're always crying for publicity. I went to them and I said, "Could I develop a brochure for the baseball team that we could use for recruiting and stuff?" Well, they didn't have time to do that. I said, "Well, can I do it?" "No problem." Well, I started doing the stuff for the baseball team. And we started getting exposure. So then he came to me and said, "By the way," he said, "why don't you come work for me?" I ended up as a student assistant. I worked for Bill Dismer, the sports information director. I think it was for $2.75 an hour. It's many hours. I went to work. In the meantime, I'm going to school. With the football program, I ran the stats crew, ran the press box for him. In basketball, I did the typewritten play-by-play at the games. He helped me hone some skills that I didn't know I had. I had an interest. But I'd never had a mentor, somebody to take me in. I had the enthusiasm, and he gave me the input. And during that time, a lot of the NCAA basketball regional or nationals were held at the University of Maryland because they had a very large field house, Cole Fieldhouse. And when he had a big major NCAA event, a gentleman named Joe Blair, and the sports information director of Maryland, would come to help. He was with the Washington Redskins. When you're doing an event like that, it's extremely labor intensive, and you may spend 2 or 3 days preparing, and you might sleep on the training tables, and you just go in and change shirts and keep going. And Joe was taken by this. Joe thought if I was coachable. So I had another mentor, a guy trying to help.
He graduated from the University of Maryland. There were a lot of people, of course, graduating that day. They had a line of graduates. He got in line with everybody else, which meant he stood for I don't know how long, a long time, to walk across the stage. Herb went down and said to Len, "Why don't you go up near the stage and sit down, and I'll get in line for you. You can step in when I get up to the stage." And he wouldn't do it. He said, "I've come this far, I'd like to finish it."
After I got out of college, one of the assistants from Maryland, assistant football coaches, had taken a job as a head coach at Bucknell University. And they were looking for a sports information director. And they hired me. My boss was a woman. Her name is Trini Eisler. I didn't work for the athletic department. I worked for the university PR department, which is kind of unusual. And At the time, she was the only female to head up a PR department of a major university in the country. And she was a true blue pro. So I get a call out of the blue from the Atlanta Falcons. Wonder if I consider coming to Atlanta. Wonder if I come talk to them. And I was at the time 22 years old, totally flattered. Wonder why in the world they're calling me. Well, it didn't make any sense. So they wanted me to come down right away, so I went down, we talked, and they showed me where my office would be, and here I'm in the stadium, and I'm looking down the field watching Hank Aaron shake fly balls out my office window, and I'm thinking, Lord, this can't be. And finally I said, why in the world did you call me? I said, I don't know anything about pro football. I said, to be honest with you, till you called, I wasn't quite sure if you were in the NFL or the AFL. I really didn't know. Somebody tells us you can do this job and do it well. And I said, who's that? He said, Joe Blair with the Washington Redskins. He's the guy that we slept on the training camps, trying to get ready for the NCAA basketball. So you never know. I've been real lucky. We spent a gazillion dollars getting these Falcons. Hired a guy at big bucks to train them, and we got them down at the first halftime show. They had a reenactment of a Revolutionary War battle. After the war battle was over, they turned the Falcons loose. They circled the stadium twice. We never saw them again. We played a preseason game in the late 60s in Portland, Oregon. Played the Philadelphia Eagles. And they had an old stadium there that it's called Pioneer Field. And they were in the process of refurbing it. New seats, new everything, new press box and all that. Well, we played the game in the middle of this process. So there was an awful lot of construction going on. It's a night game. In order to get to the press box, you had to go up this construction-type stairwell made out of 2x4s and 2x8s that went up the side of the building, some 3 stories. And then you get to the top of this, to the roof, then you walked across these planks to the edge of the press box. Then you actually crawled down the roof of the press box, down this ladder to get in the darn thing. So you had to be half monkey just to get there. And of course he had all these pigtails with lights kind of lighting the way. Well, I was okay going up. So I get to the press box and we do our thing. The game's over, it's time to go home. And I'm with Frank Wall, the general manager, and a fellow named Alex Hawkins. He was one of our radio team. Later wrote a book, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And Alex is quite a character, and we were all leaving together, so we got across the place. And I started a little bit ahead of them, because I was slower. So I said, they said, we'll catch up to you. Well, I get to the top of the steps, instead of going down forward, I decided I'm going to back down. Because if I slip, I can grab to something. So I'm backing down these steps. I put my weight on the banister on the right side. And the banister collapsed. I'm falling, and in the process, my one foot caught between the riser and the step. It hooked. And there I am hanging my ankle upside down, top of the stadium, and here came Frank Wall and Alex. He had grabbed me and pulled me back up. So after that, they referred to me as a second story guy. You're with a group worth literally hundreds of millions that don't have the same values you do. One of our owners at the time, he said, have you had enough? And he says, we're reorganizing the United States Auto Club in Indianapolis. I want you to go up there as our PR director. What do you think? So you tell me when. So that's when we went to Indy. Back in 1970, when I went to work for the United States Auto Club in Indianapolis, the people that sanctioned the Indy 500, their PR department was in pretty much total disarray at that point in time. I had a staff of 9 people trying to put this together at the time, and we were running 2 shifts. I had 9 full-timers and a bunch of part-timers. And I had a tremendous need for some organizational help during the evenings. And I asked a couple of people who work for me, I said, where can I find a girl that really knows this business? I don't want to spend half my life trying to train them because I don't know it. I don't know it myself. I need somebody to help train me. And somebody told me I should give this girl Nancy Davis a call. And Lord, she pitched right in. She was an old country girl from southern Indiana. She was raised like I was raised. And you worked till you got the job done. You know, there was no belly aching, just what's next? What do we got to do to get to tomorrow? And I guess we made a heck of a team just trying to dig through the quagmire. And about 3 weeks into this program, it was kind of funny. She says, and we never talked about what our backgrounds were. I knew she'd worked for Sports Headliners, but I didn't thought any more about it. And she knew I had something to do with pro football before I came there. And she says, Lynn, she says, I've been thinking, she's Mr. Henderson. She says, I've been thinking, she said, have we ever met before? And I said, no, I don't think so. I said, I'd really never been in Indiana that much. She said, well, I know Hendershot from somewhere, and I just don't know where. She said, I know your name. So, a few days went by, she came and she says, now I know where it was. She said, I do know you. She said, you and I have talked before this. And she said, I didn't think too kindly of you. And I know exactly where we met. I said, where? She said, well, we didn't meet, we met on the phone. She said, I was Chuck Barnes' secretary with Headliners, Sports Headliners. And she said, did you ever do anything with O.J. Simpson? And I said, yeah, I did. I said, when I was in Atlanta with the Falcons, the Atlanta Braves owned the rights to the Coach's All-American football game. And they would contract me to handle the PR. And I said, back in '68, whether the game was successful or not, depending upon whether O.J. played. And Kodak, Chevrolet, and all that were sponsoring the game. And they were all counting on O.J., and O.J. was negotiating the contract then with Ralph Wilson at the Buffalo Bills. And they wouldn't allow him to play in the game as long as that contract was not signed. And there was a big upheaval, and we had a letter of commitment from O.J., but then he backed out at the last minute. And I said, I was in constant touch with Headliners. And I said, I'm the most uncooperative group of people I've ever met in my life. And I said, I kept getting blocked by this damn secretary. And she said, I was that damn secretary. So, so you never know. I had worn myself down as usual physically, and we were getting ready to go to Phoenix for our first race with the Indy cars. And I went out there, and on the way back, it was very warm, of course, in Phoenix during the Easter period. And then I got in Chicago, and it was bone-chilling, 20-degree type temperature. Got back to Indianapolis. It was very cold. The next day, I couldn't breathe. So I ended up with pneumonia in Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis. And they had me in isolation because they weren't quite sure what was happening with my lungs. And at that point in time, we had a tremendous amount of things going at that time. And it was imperative that I get back to people in correspondence. I mean, you just couldn't believe what was happening. It was a terrible time to get sick. And they would talk to me on the phone. And there were things I needed to see and read and keep on top of, and they couldn't get it to them. I said, you guys figure out a way to get it over here. And all of a sudden, Nancy started showing up early in the morning with the correspondence, smuggled in a tape recorder. I would tape under the sheets because they didn't want me to work. They wanted me to rest. I was on auction, all that. And then she would come back at night to visit. And after about 2 or 3 days of this, I said, how the hell are you getting in here anyway? She said, I told her I was your fiance. I said, well, it works. Yeah, it works for them, works for me. I said, no problem. So that, and we laughed. And about, 5, 6 months later, we married. USAC was a nonprofit organization run by 24 board of directors, all with a vested interest. It was impossible to get a decision. There was constant bickering and jockeying for position. You have 24 millionaires with egos about the size of Texas. There was a big debate at one time whether to race at Michigan International Raceway Speedway up in Brooklyn, Michigan. It was a very high-speed track. And they were arguing all the safety issues. Pro and con, we're going to get people killed, blah, blah, blah. It was quite obvious at that point in time they shouldn't race on that racetrack. But the reason was there weren't tires developed to withstand the speed and the heat that was going to be generated. So when the vote came, although all the safety issues said not to do it, they voted to do it, risk a lot of lives. I mean, it was hairy. It was really how we got away from there without killing somebody that first year is remarkable. It all came down to money and speed and advantage. You had the advantage. There was no person out here looking after the whole, you know what I'm saying? When it comes to the comparison at that time between stock car racing and IndyCar racing, I mean, it was very, very, very few people got hurt. They get a bum knee, screwed up shoulder, concussion, but still you do. Same thing happens in football, but you don't die. I had some dealings with NASCAR, with their people down there, because of a lot of the USAC drivers would race NASCAR on the FIA, the international events, things like the Daytona 500. NASCAR is run by one man. They're now the France family. He called me one day and he says, you ready to make a little change? And I said, who is this, sir? He says, he said, this is Bill France from Daytona. I couldn't believe that Bill France was calling me from Daytona. He said, I want you to come over here and work with Russ and learn this business. He knew I wasn't quite happy with the United States Auto Club, the open wheel type racing, because people die in that sport back then, and people get burned, and here again, I probably too sensitive a character to be involved in a sport like racing at that time. There's very few people in this world, I mean, a lot of people that we all like and others we respect, but there's very, very few that we both like and respect and trust. And he was one of those. Learned patience, the art of compromise, witnessed his persuasive ways, and learned how to manage people without offending them, how to make them feel like a team. We had a PR department and all that type of thing, but we didn't have a marketing department, and we didn't have somebody that would go out and try to sell the organization. We were also, the NFL at that time had enjoyed a tremendous amount of success licensing products, and NASCAR didn't know how to spell licensing, and I had a little background from the National Football League and how it worked. But they were very, no, this looks like we're going to chase your tail. It's a lot of waste of time. But if you want to pursue it a little bit, go ahead. But don't spend a lot of time on it. Well, when I walked into their office one day with a $5,000 check from Bib Manufacturing, they were a textile manufacturer that made all these pillow shams and bedspreads for kids' rooms that were being sold at that time at Sears and Roebuck. Much like you had the Mickey Mouse stuff and all that. Well, they had a design with all NASCAR stock cars and all that. And they were The $5,000 was for an advance against the royalties. And they just couldn't understand why anybody was paying us for that. But I said, well, do you want me to send a check back? Of course, I didn't want that either. So that was the beginning of the licensing program. I'd gone through life, I never considered myself having a disability. I mean, you'd say march, I marched. You know, I may march a little funny, but I'd march. Young Bill France had taken over NASCAR. His dad retired, and of course he had certain ideas on how things should be run. I get a call from his secretary, and he says, Billy needs to see you about 4 o'clock. So I go over and go to his office, and I don't know what's on his mind. And he's sitting there, and he said, look, he said, I've been thinking, you're in and out of these offices making all these presentations. I'm a little afraid what people might think. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, a lot of people don't want to deal with people on crutches. And that's the first time I had a lesson on what prejudice was all about. I said, I don't understand. Well, he said, you know, people are kind of funny, and we send you and we have you front this thing, and you go in there, they might get the wrong idea. He said, so I think I've been thinking, he said, John Cooper, you know John Cooper from USAC. I think I'll bring him in. Let him head the thing up. I'll pay you whatever you want, the money you want, everything. But you just get it done. But let's let John front this thing. And I was enraged. I was absolutely blown away. I had never had this happen to me before. And I didn't handle it very well. And meantime, during this, every time I would go, happened back by Hancock or Wolfersburg. A gentleman after my father's death, my Uncle Lem Kirk, was a very major part of my life. He was my mentor, the guy, when things weren't going right. I'd call him and say, Uncle Lem, what do you think about whatever it may be? And he always said, like, you need to get a rest. He said, why don't you come up here and run our Ford dealership? Kirk Ford and Hancock. And they kept joking. I picked up the phone. I said, Uncle Lem, you said many, many times, why don't you come back here and run the Ford dealership? Because he wanted to retire. And I said, are you serious? He said, when do you want to start? I stopped in Knoxville for gas. Went to get in the men's room. I slept was very smooth, finished concrete. I did damage to the ulnar nerve of my left elbow and dislocated the right shoulder and did a rotator cuff and all that. But after that, I could never put any weight on the crutches. I keep re-injuring them. You know, I keep pulling things. It seemed like I lived on Tylenol painkillers. Trying to walk, my blood pressure and everything else was out of whack. Kept re-injuring things, and I had to go to a wheelchair, which is something I absolutely didn't want to do, but I had to. After I'd fallen and hurt my arms in the early 80s, of course I didn't know what in the world I was going to do, because I would spend a lifetime jumping on and off of airplanes and flipping around the country, and I never had a problem with the way people perceived me with crutches. It seemed like males in particular had a very difficult time dealing with a guy in a wheelchair, whether he could or couldn't do a job. And all of a sudden, accounts became extremely hard to get. The confidence level that people had in me went from 100% to 60%. And it was just, I can't explain it. It was just, I had a terrible time with that. And it finally became obvious that I had to do it some way, a different way. And a promoter at Pocono had made some money racing big trucks back during that same period. Hal Needham and putting together a movie called Smoking the Bandit. Actually, it was Smoking the Bandit 2 opened with a truck race, and he needed this. He needed a truck race scene, and they did this in Atlanta, Georgia, and to everybody's surprise, literally tens of thousands of people came out to see this. I mean, it was Strictly a PR stunt on Needham's part. Nobody ever dreamed anybody give a damn about that. But they were coming out of the woodwork to see this. And from that, a truck racing organization was started. I was recovering from shoulder surgery, and I was asked, would you step in there and please get involved in this thing and try to organize it so we can make some money? I made a deal, and then I renamed it, called it Great American Truck Racing, which is GATR, which we called Gator.
I think the fastest we ran up at the Pocono International Speedway, it was 138 miles an hour. They'll fly. They'll absolutely fly. That particular race, I think we probably had maybe 25 or 30,000 people there. And we had one lap to go, and I can remember whenever they came and they got the white flag, there were 3 trucks that were in the hunt. And whenever I saw them cross the start-finish line, my thought was, we've got a problem, because they were all running just wheel to wheel, going as hard as they could. And it was like everybody was out of control. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in any sporting event, because the crowd was just going crazy. And going into the first turn, one of the trucks, again, these are all open wheel trucks. One of the trucks, its front wheel hit the back wheel of another truck, and the truck actually got airborne. And it hit the base of the wall, the fence, and the wall disappeared. It went right out of the racetrack. And the next thing you know, you've got total silence. I mean, because 30,000 people thought they had just witnessed the death. I was one of the safety officials at that time. There was a TV crew there, and the TV crew jumped in the back of the golf cart, said, "We want to go with you." And by the time we got within maybe 50 yards, here comes the driver. His name is Charlie Baker, who's actually run some NASCAR races. Charlie has come up over the hill, and he is waving, and everything's okay, and it was just a heck of a ride. The next thing I knew, he was going to do another race in Atlanta. And, I said, "Lynn, what are you doing? We can't do a race. You don't want to do a race in Atlanta. We've talked about that." And he's going, "No, it's okay." So I got the corporate sponsor, and the corporate sponsors said, "We don't have to worry about it. He's going to underwrite it. So it's a perfect situation. I can't lose any money." And the next thing you know, there truly was a significant loss. It's kind of the end of Great American Truck Racing.
Truck crash in Atlanta, Georgia.
That's the day I shot the wad.
The last day. When you lost all the money is when you also had one of the crashes?
We had lots of crashes. But my dad used to have a pet saying when I would maybe go on and on and on about a subject, and he'd look at me, he'd put his hand on his shoulder, and he said, "Boy, you don't learn a damn thing when you're doing all the talking. You only learn when you're listening." The reality of that statement, after hit rock button rang home loud and clear, a lot of people had been throwing up warning signs all along the way. And because of my stubbornness, my arrogance about how good I was at the marketing business, my can-do, don't tell me I can't do it attitude that maybe was an offshoot of the polio. No matter ignoring the warning signs and keep going on. I didn't want to see the sport die because of my inability to handle things, so I worked very diligently to try to find somebody to buy it. All my life I had done things that I liked to do and wanted to do. I was good at them. I had a lot of successes. Never really failed before, didn't know how to fail. I had absolutely rock bottom. The whole world had crumbled, and it was a real gut check, reality check, and what's important, and I found out an awful lot about Lynn Hendershot, and I guess I didn't like a lot of what I was finding. I found that I wasn't invincible, that sometimes, no matter how hard you worked, you still couldn't make it work. We were married for 18 years. Sometimes we liked each other, sometimes we didn't. We have a tremendous respect for each other. I always loved the woman. But somewhere along the line, because of the pressures of the sports and all that, we grew apart. And we divorced in '88. We're still good friends. But through all this, one thing that Nancy and I had in common was a tremendous love and do anything type attitude for our daughter, Pam. And Pam, at the time of the divorce, was at a very, very difficult age. She was like 13 years old and going through adolescence and just totally didn't understand why we couldn't communicate. Because we'd been so close. I mean, really close. I mean, like soulmates. I mean, we knew. You didn't have to question what we were thinking. We knew what each other thought. And somehow that went away, and boy, I lost something really, really important. When I went to Atlanta with the Falcons, we did a lot of charitable type things with the local shrine there. So in time, I became a member of the Scottish Rite in the Arab Temple there in Atlanta because of the charity work we were doing. But then when I hit rock bottom, a lot of those type of things all of a sudden seemed to be important again. To me personally, I had a good friend that I knew there encouraged me to suck it up and let's go, you know. He was a big red-headed dude and stop the damn pity party and let's get on with things. And he was into clowning. They have all these shrine functions anytime. He loved to dress up as a clown. His name was Baffles. And he was trying to get me motivated. He said, why don't you help me with this thing? We need some more clowns. And I said, well, help you get some more clowns. And they were called the Magical Misfits. And after a while, he said, Hendershot, why don't you be a clown? I can't be a clown. You know, they want to see a gimpy clown, you know. Oh, yeah, we can do it. We got to come up with a name. We got to come up with this. We got to come up with an outfit, a look, blah, 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 blah. And so he kind of made me a project. He just wouldn't let me alone. Till I'd be, okay, let's do it. So I was using a wheelchair then. And I didn't want anybody to see me in a wheelchair. And I had an old wheelchair from my racing days. It was kind of in mothballs in the garage. And he's out there painting it and changing. He made a tow truck out of it. Put a winch on the back of it. So it didn't look like a wheelchair. So he thought, well, yeah, I'll put you in a clown outfit, put you on that chair, and the kids will love it. And you'll have fun, and you can tow the balloons around. We'll give the balloons away. He said, what do you want to call yourself? I said, well, if I'm going to be toting balloons around, I guess I'll be... My dad, of course, ran a towing business for years. I guess I'll be Totem. I'll tote the balloons. So I've been Totem ever since, Stan. And Totem the Clown, so... It was fun. We did a lot of good at the Shrine Circuses, but more important than that, we did a lot of work throughout the year with children, hospitals and stuff. And that really, again, drove home what was important. They were building the Georgia Dome. The owner of the Falcon asked me if I would serve on a 5-person task force to work with the architects to build the Georgia Dome and to look at the accessibility features. Now, this was pre-Americans with Disability Act, but they knew it was coming. And so I agreed. I thought I was flattered that he had asked me, and it was a committee of 5 people, 4 of whom were very well known in the community, headed by a gentleman named Jim Cherry, who was he was a lawyer himself. He's a quadriplegic, but he's an attorney. I was just an ex-employee that thought I wanted to help my ex-boss a little bit. And I took the job very seriously. I thought he genuinely wanted to make this place as accessible as possible. I didn't know that this was kind of a ploy. I was naive enough. I don't think they were really interested in these 5 people's input, but they wanted to be able to say that they had consulted with the disability community and this was okay. Well, about a third of the way through the process, the committee was then abandoned. And when the Georgia Dome was finished, there were numerous violations, okay? And I filed a formal complaint with the Justice Department. And since that time, they made several $1 million worth of corrections. But that's the problem is these are all retrofit. They're not done right. Billy Payne had sold the Olympic officials on the idea of bringing the Olympics to Atlanta. And they were going to do about $1 billion to $1.2 billion in new construction. And Cherry says, we got to make sure this dome mess doesn't happen again. He said, we just can't let it happen again. And there was a committee formed actually by the Olympics here again, with the understanding of being politically correct. It was called the Committee on Disability Access, which was part of ACOG, the Atlanta Committee on the Olympic Games. And they were to assure that the facility, this game, was the most accessible. I was named to that committee along with a number of other people from the community, probably 20 in all. But Jim Cherry headed up that task force, and I was very much involved with it. Eric Krunick and a number of very top-notch disability advocates from the Southeast and from the nation. But as luck would have it, the Olympic Stadium itself was being designed by the same architect that had done the Georgia Dome, the same exact project manager. The head-to-head confrontations were legendary. I mean, the battles were fierce. This went on for, really, the fiercest the battle went on for almost 2.5 years. Every place we went, there were attorneys. The Justice Department, we'd gotten involved in the middle of this. And it was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life, is trying to bring about a change in attitude, not on the part of the public, but on the part of the people with the wealth that make things happen. They're into pretty and glitz and glitter, but they weren't very much into functionality. There was so much money involved that you really honestly felt the laws didn't apply to them. It really didn't. We would go into meetings sometimes, and it was always kind of a joke. And, you know, we learned how to play good guy, bad guy. And we'd go into a meeting, he'd call me night before, and I would get tired of being the bad guy, because I'm very uncomfortable with being the bad guy. It's not my nature. And I said, tomorrow, what do I have to be? He said, unfortunately, you're going to have to be the bad guy. I said, how bad do I have to be? And if it was a serious meeting, he said, just like an angry Baptist minister. Unfortunately, that's how we handled it. I mean, it was bad theater, but we didn't know how to get anywhere without creating a problem. You had the Justice Department, their Civil Rights Department, trying to do what they could, but they had so many complaints nationwide, and I think at the time they had less than 10 attorneys trying to handle the country. And I can remember talking to Justice in Washington, and they were saying, Lynn, we're just overwhelmed. And I pleaded with them. I said, let me make one more statement before we give up on this thing. I said, I know you're overwhelmed. But I said, if I'm in a barroom brawl, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of bullies, and I know I don't have much of a chance to win the battle, I've got one shot. I've got to pick out the ugliest, meanest, mouthiest guy in the group. And I got to hit him with everything I got. And if I can knock him to his knees, I've got the attention of the rest of the group. And I've got a chance to accomplish something. In that case, get out of the bar alive. I said, with you, if you take all your resources and focus on Atlanta, Georgia, for 1996, where the world's focused on this place, and you can make this city truly accessible, you will have sent a message to the guy in Peoria and the guy in Albuquerque where you don't have to worry whether what he builds is right or not. And there was a silence at the other end, and they came back to us about 3 days later, said, we're going to go with it, let's go. And after that, things got better. I can remember the battles. There were threats. One of the big turning points, we were in a meeting with the organizers one time. There was like 10 people. There were people from Fulton County, Georgia, top officials, people from the city. Jim Cherry and I were representing the disabled community. And I made a statement about conflicts of interest and how somehow we had to get to the bottom of it and make things look out for the welfare of the people. And Barry got up and shook his fist in my face and told me that I was nothing but a troublemaker and he was going to get me. He was going to get me, and stormed out of the room. And the meeting was over. And I really don't know what triggered it, but evidently I hit a nerve. And I felt, now where do we go from here? And this was during the month of December. And we left. And during the month of December, there were lots of Christmas parties for all these officials, and they were getting together. It turned out, unbeknownst to us, we were the topic of discussion. And the topic of discussion was how this guy had threatened this guy in his wheelchair because he was questioning the accessibility of a lot of the venues at the Olympics. And that was a story that was circulating at these cocktail parties. Well, by the month of January, when I went to the meeting at ACOG, I got pulled up. There was somebody to meet me. They opened my door for me. They wanted to carry my attaché. They wanted to know what I drank in my coffee. Would I like any kind of a snack? Would I like cheese or melon for the course of the meeting? And I never been treated that way before by ACOG. And I get to the table with Cherry, and I whispered to him, I said, what the hell's going on? I said, I almost didn't come today. I felt like I might have been met with guns. And he said, no. He said, I can't talk now. He said, whatever you need to say it. And I said, well, I don't want to cause any more problems. He said, Lynn, do what we got to do. He said, you've got an $80 million hammer. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm telling you, don't back off. Go for it. Be aggressive. And the meeting was a wonderful meeting. There was a tremendous amount accomplished. And after the meeting, we get outside and Cherry, what in the world are you talking about, an $80 million hammer? He said, you rub with Barry. It was the best thing that's happened. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you were the topic of discussion during the cocktail parties. Two of the sponsors, who paid $40 million apiece, threatened to pull out if the venues were not made accessible. The bottom line is they've ended up with some pretty decent facilities. A community is more accessible than would have been otherwise. A racing buddy of mine, Steve Cook, called my family when I went to the hospital and told them that Lynn's in trouble. And less than 36 hours later, my mother and my sister had driven to Atlanta, Georgia from Pennsylvania.
When they called us and said that Lynn was sick, she got me, and we went down the same day. She just stopped for gas and kept going. And when we got down there, Lynn had gotten worse, and they were taking him, moving him from one room to another, and we thought he was dead. It scared us to death. And from that time on, for 4 months, she just took care of them. She fought for everything, because they didn't take Lynn very serious. He was just another person, and he was everything to us. He wouldn't be alive today, I don't think, if she hadn't stayed right down there and took care of him and insisted that he have everything, that whatever it took.
When they did the trach and they did the vent, of course my breathing was extremely shallow. In order for me to breathe, they had to inflate what they call the cuff around the trach. And when you do that, you cannot talk. If you'd open up the trach, then I couldn't breathe. So it was, you had a choice. Do you want to talk or do you want to breathe? And so, of course, when you're as sick as I was at that particular point in the process, you're extremely weak. You have trouble moving your hands. You can hear, you're totally aware. My mind was going the proverbial mile a minute. I was in intensive care in Atlanta, Georgia for 2 months, and then they tried to have me in a different hospital, trying to regain some strength for another month. My sister, she was the advocate of advocates. And when they would talk about weaning, she would be at the medical library trying to learn everything she could about weaning. Whatever the subject may be, there may be a more caring person in the world. I haven't met her yet, whoever it is.
I told Marion's daughter that she will go down in history as Saint Marion for what she did, because spending, taking 3 months or 4 months or whatever time away from her family and going to the hospital every day and doing what she did, I don't know how many people I know would have done that.
They came back to me and told me about the Western Maryland Hospital Center. Western Maryland Hospital Center, I perceived, is the last stop you make on life's highway. It was not the place I wanted to be. I thought, Lord, they're telling me one thing, but they've given up on me. I couldn't hear the harps, but I expected to hear them many times. I got to Western Maryland Hospital Center. They wheeled me into a 4-person room, and I just didn't quite know how to handle this. There were noises going off. Everybody was on ventilators and feeding pumps and IVs sounding. It was spooky. Very, very, very spooky. The first 2 or 3 days were kind of rough. But then people from Murfreesburg started showing up. And I didn't know if it was last rites or what it was, but I know I had a lot of friends. Where I had an incredible number of cards in Atlanta. 400 or 500 cards, which I couldn't believe. I mean, from various sports people I knew and a lot of local people and our Murfreesburg group there. Very much into prayer chains. I really wasn't a strong believer in prayer chains. But I sure believe now. Through the help of the respiratory care people, they were trying to overcome the anxiety problems. When I came in there, they had me in 4 different kinds of tranquilizers, and I didn't know what day it was because of how frightened I was. They finally, after a week or so, started to put air in my cuff where I could communicate. And after they weaned me off the oxygen, I had a ventilator using oxygen, and little by little, I can breathe room air now, if you will, without the aid of oxygen, just a ventilator. All of a sudden, I could talk again. And when you have 3 months to think about something, you got a lot to say. And I haven't stopped since, I guess. When I got to Western Maryland, it was a long-term care, chronic care type hospital. You were dealing with the people that the medical profession had given up on. Basically, that's what you have there. And it was a place to warehouse people. That's maybe being pretty cold and hard, but some of the perception I had of the place were true, that I wasn't liking what I was seeing. I was very uneasy. The hospital built in '57 hadn't changed a whole lot. At that point, the only hospital I know of east of the Mississippi, that telephone service wasn't available in the rooms. I mean, it was archaic. There you talk about bringing a computer in. My sister recommends to overcome anxiety. They didn't have a clue what you're talking about. When we started in the medical library that overlooks the auditorium, one of the patients came in one day, a fellow named David Clift, who has been a resident there for over 30 years. He's a quadriplegic from a diving accident. And he wanted to know what I was doing and how I did it. He asked me one question. He said, would you teach me how to do this? I said, do what? He said, work the computer. I think I can do that. Well, that was the first person in months that asked me to do anything. Most motivating words of any of us, the words, I need you. I felt needed all of a sudden. I had a reason to get up in the morning because David Cliff, he wanted me to teach me how to work the computer. So then we had to get a computer for David. I had a number of computers in my basement of my home, which I owned there. And I still had my van in Atlanta. So here comes my good friend Peter Christensen loaded to the hilt with everything out of my basement. Of course, I hadn't mentioned this to anybody in the hospital. I was just trying to accommodate David. And so they unloaded the stuff from this medical library one day on a table. I did have the room in somewhat of disarray, as you can well imagine. And we had a lot of 1950s, 60s type nursing mentality there, the typical Nurse Cratchit types. One in particular came in and wanted to know what in the world I thought I was doing. And she gave me absolute hell. And her way of doing things are totally out of line with the rehab type environment. I was working to get better, and she was working to keep me from dying. I wasn't worried about dying, I was worried about living. A little bit later, here she comes with 4 more supervisors, and they're laying down the law on what I can and can't do. Thus far, I hadn't done anything. I had just put some pieces to computers on a table. And they were really giving me the riot act. And I became totally enraged. Not real proud of it. I felt very strongly about what I was doing. And I felt good about helping this person, one person at a time. And I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. And my comment was, this place has a lot of needs. And if you were doing your job, you wouldn't have the time in here to spend all 5 of you in here telling me how to do it. And I'd appreciate it if you'd get the out right now. Come back later and see what I've got. But don't judge me on this. Please leave. And I want you to leave now. And that caused a tremendous war. I regret my language, but I had reached a point that enough was enough. They were, to me, because of their attitude, they were threatening the welfare, not only of me, but the entire patients. And I could see this culture, this attitude throughout. That brought about a series of meetings with management. And I thought, well, we're either all gone, I'm going to be asked to leave, or the computer program is dead in the water. They came back to me, and the next thing was from management is, do you need additional tables to put the computers up? And that was the beginning of Computer Lab. It was a real turning point, and that took me from a patient to somebody that was actually hopefully doing some good I was part of the team at that point in time. I became a little more than a patient. But during that time, they had a change in directors. The old director, ex-military man nice man, but he wasn't about to make any waves or make any changes. He was just status quo. Like it had been run for 38, 39 years. And they had a new director. Cindy Pellegrino was extremely dynamic, came out of the rehab area, and she didn't know about this warehousing people stuff. She was willing to address a lot of the quality of life issues and she was in the Hope area trying to give people a little bit of opportunity to get out of the bed. You have to sell it to the staff. You're changing a culture. You've got nurses and aides and doctors and therapists that have been in this mindset for years. And now you've got to go back and tell them it's all right to try things differently. Yes, it's going to be a little more work to try to help a person to the bathroom to rehabilitate. Rather than stick an seizure, stick a bedpan under them. But you got to try to motivate these people to try to be a little more independent. When I invite people up, it's kind of corny, but I say come by the lab and watch miracles in the making. And that's what we do there. We try to instill a little self-confidence, a little pride, try to give a little of that dignity back that maybe sicknesses in the hospitals robbed. Not intentionally, but when you come into a hospital and you're very, very sick, you have to park your dignity at the door. You're robbed of all that in order to get the confidence back and overcome a lot of the anxiety. It's a process, and Club Overlook kind of helps people work through this process and sometimes accelerate that process. That's what we do. It started with Cliff when he came in and said, "Can you show me how to do that?" And I'm trying to grasp for every breath. I had somebody in this place that needs me. And he's taking it. He's not very limited education with no family support. And this is his life right here, right now. He was in Hopkins for several weeks and he was getting email from all over the world. He's getting cards from all over the world. But this is a guy that's been here for 32 years. This stuff was all donated by a group down in the Baltimore area, a group called the Lazarus Foundation, Mr. Don Bard. They go out and they gather up equipment like this from various corporations, and they work directly with the Elder Hostel, and they bring them in, literally from all over the country, about 40 people at a time, and they refurbish machines, and then they give them to nonprofits around the country. And I don't know, in the last 2 years, we've been able to place about 70 of these machines here in this 4-state area to people that need them, people that wouldn't otherwise have access to this kind of technology. It's not cutting edge, but it's their feet wet. We're not going to have any computer geniuses coming out here, but we're doing a lot. It's almost half spiritual, half psychological. We're trying to preach that this ain't the end. It's maybe we've got to look for a new beginning here somewhere. And sometimes we got people that'll take us up on the challenge. When I get up in the morning, I look forward to coming here. I feel like something good's going to happen. My good friend Glenn, he's screwed up in a car wreck. But he was up here a lot. We were up here last night till about 9, 10 o'clock. And he was saying that he made his rounds in the hospital. It was therapy for me when I was in his predicament, just getting away from it'll get to you if you don't move around a little bit. And I know he's constantly visiting other patients, getting them things, trying to help them. And that's kind of a mirror image where I was a couple years ago. That's all I was trying to do. Maybe I was helping them, but I was trying to keep my own sanity. During the recent Disabilities Week here in 1999, we did Barrier Awareness Days, where we took as decision makers in our community that controlled budgets that could get things done, and we put them in a wheelchair for a day or for a part of a day and asked them to go to certain places in the chair and come back with their findings. And one of we had 2 schools in close proximity to Western Maryland State Hospital that was easy to get to. So I led the caravan each of the 2 days down the sidewalk, pointing out problems with the sidewalks as we went, and of course the idea was trying to point out these few things with the idea that the entire community, as through the years, would be fixed to better accommodate not only those in wheelchairs, but mothers with baby strollers, kids on bicycles, just to make our sidewalks safer. and to accommodate what the code called for, which is a smooth 4-foot sidewalk in this particular community. And our tour ended at the local schoolhouse, which was Fountaindale Elementary, which was county property, which was managed by the Washington County's school board. It was all county money. And here we are with these county commissioners. The tour ends on county property where there's no curb cuts, and you can't go any further. At that point, we simply said, well, this is where the tour ends. We can't go any further. And we noticed, we pointed out there's no curb cuts. And I said, unfortunately, gentlemen, this is county property. And I said, if we want the taxpayers, the landowners to fix their sidewalks, we need to set an example for them. And hopefully in time we can get these fixed. Well, within a month of that trip up the sidewalk, they're up as we speak now with backhoes and cement mixers and framing material, tearing out sidewalks and putting in new sidewalks. So at least for several hundred yards of paving in this community, we've gotten that fixed. It's fall now and it's starting to, not quite as brilliant as what it was, but this has turned out to be a pretty nice hangout for the patients and their families. We have a lot of activities and we got a good sale on some umbrellas for the tables. John just wanted to get the fountain to work. The fountain was stuck down here in the bushes and I went to Ferris and said, what can we do? That'd be kind of something they could watch, and the sound of running water is always nice.
Lynn is in touch with his mortality. He jokes with his doctors and with other people about raising the question with them. He's going to do some grocery shopping. Should he buy green bananas? Is he going to live long enough to see the bananas ripen and enjoy them? I think he knows that his situation could change rapidly, and he doesn't seem to be fearful about that. His preference would certainly be to live and to especially be productive and to be able to contribute while he lives. I don't see him as being a fearful or anxious person in terms of his mortality, but someone who simply wants to live every day to the fullest and to contribute wherever he can. When I think of Lynn, I think of courage, and I think of productivity, total intolerance of any self-pity in himself. He just looks on the bright side and does whatever he can to add to someone else's life and to enjoy his own life in the greatest measure that he possibly can every day.
The pneumonia's been going on for 4 weeks, 5 weeks. He's been in the hospital twice, but he was too busy. He had to get out of the hospital to do this, to do that. One of the things that I talked to him, I'm going, Lynn, it takes somebody who's perfectly healthy who gets pneumonia 6 or 8 weeks to recuperate, and you're trying to do it in a week. And we've had our green bananas conversation. It's like 3 years ago, whenever you had tubes all over you, I bought the green banana story. Okay, but now I don't buy it. If you take care of yourself, you'll probably outlive Sis and I. Okay, and if you keep worrying us the way you are, I know you'll outlive us both. In his mind, he has conquered fear by activity. By, I've got to. I mean, Lynn is into I've got to. It's like, no, you don't have to.
I don't really mean to shortchange myself. I really don't. I have all intentions of doing, but I've worked in PR and marketing and journalism type activities all my life. Everything I've ever done is deadline oriented. And you quit when the job's done.
Lynn has a lot of things he wants to accomplish, and in order to accomplish them, sometimes he needs help. So my agenda sometimes gets put aside because I get a phone call. If it goes on too constant, I mean, to be very truthful with you, I get tired. I sometimes feel like my own life gets put on the back burner. If I've done everything I know to do and I still haven't done it right, I've had some of that problem. I know it's frustration, his own frustration, but you always take it out on the person that's there. He's always had the ability to take the situation and make it work. I think an example of that right now is this week. I mean, you can see he's not in the best situation as far as being in the hospital and everything, and some very sick people are around him. And yet he knows he needs to be there, and he just makes it work. He feels this is one of the most fulfilling times of his life in that he's helping other people. So I guess the Lord has a purpose for why these things happen that we don't always know. So I think this has been, what looked like it was going to be the pits has actually turned out to be a good experience for him. Up until he got sick in October, he was staying by himself. He has a fear right now. He says that what has happened in the last month has hurt his confidence level to live alone. So I don't think he's sure how we're going to handle this.
See you guys tomorrow.
Are you going out?
I'm going home.
What's your status to us?
I'm now, I guess I'm in a pool right now.
You are. You mean he guesses.
I went from patient to employee.
So in other words, we're not gonna let you sleep here anymore.
I don't sleep here anymore, that's all.
Oh, I bet you're excited to be going home again. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Don't blow away out there.
Don't want to do that.
You better hold that hat.
we go to college and we are educated to do a certain specific thing, and very few of us end up doing, in most cases, what we were trained to do. And life takes those little twists and turns, and you got those little nudges of fate, if you will, that send us different directions. If you'd have told me that my main interest was going to be in helping mold the future of the healthcare industry, if you'd have told me that 10 years ago, I would have told you you're out of your mind. I get very discouraged when I talk to the politicians locally and in Washington, and they just don't understand what the needs are going to be. I don't think these politicians, in most cases, are really in tune with what the true needs are. They only react to the special interest groups and that type of. It bothers me immensely. None of us. I mean, nobody wants to be dependent on everybody for everything. And some of us are a little lazier than others, but you got your dignity, and you don't want to, if you've got any fiber at all, you want to try to be as independent as you can. And that's just human nature. And when you have vibrant people that have had this all independence taken away from them, either by an illness or an accident or whatever, I mean, the result mentally and socially is just devastating. And it takes sometimes years to work through all these issues. Then you gotta have some fire. You gotta get mad then, determined, whatever you wanna call it, and focus on something you wanna accomplish, and then don't let anybody tell you can't do it. I mean, you gotta keep trying to figure out how to do it. Tried to remind people, the people that deal with the patients, you gotta make the patient part of the process. You treat them like they're worth something. Just ask their opinion on things. Get them involved in the process. Don't dictate them that, okay, you're gonna stay in bed to 10 because it's good for you. Maybe the patient's got a better idea that's what's best for him or her.